Okay, here we are, another edition of the Dave and Amber podcast. And today we are going to talk about all of our gear, and there's a lot of it. So I don't, Amber, why don't you kind of tell people what you carry around? And because it's a lot of stuff.
What do I not carry around is how I feel some days. So I am still on MDI therapy, which is multiple daily injections. So I have insulin, my insulin pen. I have an insulin vial. I have insulin pen needles. I have syringes. Then I have my phone because obvious reasons, but that gives me my Dexcom numbers. I have low blood sugar snacks. Let me think what else. Alcohol swabs.
Now, do you keep all of this stuff in your purse?
Yes. And I will say that men have a disadvantage when it comes to that, which you could carry a handbag. I'd be totally cool with that, but it makes life easier for sure.
Now, do you also have stuff also in your car?
Oh, yeah. But I don't keep supplies. It's more just low blood sugar supplies.
I think that, it's kind of interesting because I use the Omnipod, which is a tubeless insulin pump, and it's controlled by a device called a PDM, a personal diabetes manager, which basically looks like a cell phone. But I also, because I work out, I basically have duplicates of my life in every area. I have, like you, I carry with me what I call instant sugar. A lot of people buy them. They're glucose tablets or a liquid should my blood sugars drop, it immediately boosts my sugar. So I keep that in my golf bag. I keep it in my workout bag. When I ride my bicycle, I always make sure that I have this little bag attached to my bike, and there's some in there. And it is kind of funny because, you always are worried, at least I don't know about you, but for me especially, because my pump is not yet controlled by my phone. It will be, but it's not yet. I'm always freaked out. Where is my PDM? Because if I lose that, I can't do anything. I mean, it'll work, but I can't, like if I'm going to eat, I can't give myself any additional insulin without having the PDM.
Okay, let me ask you this. Do you carry extra pod supplies with you?
Yes and no. When I travel,
sure.
I'm always like, if I'm going to go on a trip, that my pods, most patients don't know this, pods last for 80 hours. Okay, 3 days plus 8 hours, basically. And so what I do is when I travel, let's say I'm going to have a change during my traveling, I always carry extras in case there's a failure.
Sure.
Because as much as I would love this thing to work 100% of the time, and I would say that I haven't experienced a lot of pod failures, but it does happen.
Sure.
And this is something that I laugh when I pack, because most of us, when we pack for a trip, what are we packing? We pack all of our chargers, right? Well, I'm packing a charger for my PDM because it's a separate charger than my cell phone.
Which sucks. Yeah.
Yeah. But it's, it's a way that it works. And then probably like yourself, I'm kind of nuts about my insulin.
Yeah.
I make sure that I don't carry insulin with me on a daily basis.
You don't have to because you're podded up. Yeah.
But I am very careful when I travel because obviously the vial is made out of glass. And so I've been on vacations where I'll put my insulin vial somewhere, knock it over, and boom, there goes my insulin.
There goes $1,000 worth of medication.
Wait until that happens when you're like in the Caribbean, because it did happen to me once when I was in the Caribbean. That was interesting. But it's funny because I think most of the people that are involved in our lives don't realize all of the stuff that we're carrying around.
Yeah.
And it's like, I know people, and I don't do this, but I do know people, and you probably do as well, who carry emergency glucagon. Okay.
Right.
So and again, without getting overly technical, if there's a severe hypoglycemic event, which means the patient's blood sugar is just dropping dramatically, this is, basically there's two forms of it now. You can either inject it into a person's body, or there's now a nasal spray that works as well.
Thank goodness, let me say, for the person who has to deal with a person with a low blood sugar. I mean, anywho, keep going. Sorry.
Yeah. Well, no, but you're absolutely right. I mean, emergency glucagon, I don't carry it. I know a lot of patients who do. And I think that's another part. Especially, if a patient isn't using insulin, the chances of them having a severe hypoglycemic event, I'm not saying it doesn't happen, but it is quote unquote rare.
Mm-hmm.
There are certain drugs when if let's say a patient doubles up on a therapy that they shouldn't, okay, takes 2 pills instead of 1,
Right.
That might cause that, but that's not something that usually you're going to have to worry about if you're not using insulin.
No, for sure. We're getting back to Diabetes Ger. What does it look like? What do we call it? And what do you need to know about? So you asked a question earlier. So I have, when you have to test your blood sugar, I call it a tester. But it is technically called a glucometer, right?
Well, that's a technical name for it. Correct.
But if you say, hey, where's your glucometer? Most people with living with diabetes is going to be like, what the hell are you talking about? It's my tester.
Well, I think the common phrase is meter. Where's my meter?
Oh, yeah. Where's my meter? Meter is a good, second one. And then we have to prick our fingers to get the blood out. So that is technically called a
Lancing device.
A lancing device. Again, why we're calling it that. It sounds really, really tragic. I call it a pricker. Where's my pricker? So if somebody's saying pricker, it's hopefully not in a negative fashion.
Well, that's the other thing that I think, a lot of people have to be cognizant of is especially, even if you're not using insulin, patients with diabetes, we're sticking ourselves a lot.
Yeah.
And it is interesting. You have to be careful, and my advice, I don't prick my fingers anymore. Okay. I'm strictly using the CGM. I don't even calibrate it. It doesn't need to be calibrated. It's very accurate. But it is interesting. I have had to warn people. I used to carry around a lot of things that if you happen to stick your hand in my bag, you might get stuck yourself. It happens.
Valid point.
And I don't know about you, but like when you test your blood sugars in what I call a conventional way, meaning when you're actually using a meter, lancing device. I don't know anybody who carries around alcohol swabs to clean their fingers.
I do.
Do you? Okay, there you go. We got one.
Just because I realized through trial and error, a lot more error, that if your finger isn't clean, and I didn't know that you could use soap and water, that it greatly affects what the outcome of the test is. So
okay, so I'm going to enlighten our listeners because the technology has really advanced exponentially over the years.
Yeah.
Today, continuous glucose monitoring is much more prevalent than it ever was. But I remember back in the day, there was an FDA panel, and this is not a joke, and it's true, that if you were going to do a glucose test by the book, meaning follow every step that was like, quote unquote, in the manual, it was 28 steps.
Oh, I believe it. Yeah.
And you bring up an interesting point about cleaning your hands, because somebody pointed this out to me and I never even thought about this. Let's say you happen to have a donut, okay?
Oh, God, I have a lot of comments on that. Keep going.
We're allowed to eat donuts, okay? But let's say that sugar got on your finger. Let's say you test through that finger where the sugar is on and you don't clean your finger. Well, the blood is going from your finger to the test strip that goes inside the meter, glucometer, whatever term you want to use, and it will pick up that sugar.
Oh, yeah.
And give you a false reading.
Right.
So,
and why that's so important to have a real number, I'm saying this to the listeners, is because I, as somebody who gives injections, base how much insulin I'm going to give on my blood sugar at the time, plus the carbs that I'm going to eat in this other scenarios. So having a false high, I'm going to give way more insulin, and that's going to cause what we're talking about, a very low blood sugar, possibly.
Well, and I think we should clarify here, the reason we have to understand our carbohydrate intake is carbs break down to sugar.
Sure.
Okay. And
it's a whole other podcast. There's so much to carbs.
Yeah. Well, for all of those people who are listening to this, who are thinking, when you are an insulin using patient, and to make our lives even more crazy, and why we keep calling this, a living science experiment, different carbs break down differently.
Yeah.
So I don't know about you. I don't know anybody who counts carbs correctly. To me, it's a wild ass guess. I do the same.
Oh, yeah. Carb guessing.
And, that's another part of our gear, really, when you think about it, because there must be, I don't even know how many apps you can download to your phone where you can type and say, okay, I'm eating Taco Bell today. Okay.
You have a really bad diet if we're talking donuts and Taco Bell. I'm just throwing that out there.
Yeah. I eat like a normal person, but you could look up, like, for example, let's say, I don't know, Taco Supreme, whatever, and it will give you an estimated carb value. And, I think that a lot of people that, I don't know about you, but like when I'm with somebody who's not diabetic, people that we talk to every day, a lot of people will ask me, I'll whip out my personal diabetes manager, which controls my Omnipod. And they'll say, what are you doing? And I'll explain to them that I have to compensate for whatever food's going to go. And then I have to think about it.
Oh, yeah.
So I was curious, have you ever, because there's even more gear that I think about the more that we talk. Do you ever carry around, I don't even know what to call that. It removes
stickiness. The
stickiness. It doesn't put it on, but it removes it. It's like
So there's a couple of different companies, and no, I don't carry that with me because I rarely am changing anything in a public setting to where I would need it. I do have it at the house. There's a company I fell in love with called Mirabalm. And so it's a spray just to remove the adhesive. So for you listening.
Right. That's what I meant. An adhesive. Yeah. Oh my God, there we go. An adhesive remover. Yeah.
So a lot of the gear, most of the gear pump wise is put on in a CGM with an adhesive.
Now, do you also carry around a cooler for your pen or your insulin?
No.
Okay. So you don't store your insulin pen in a device that keeps it cool.
No, and I know there's a lot of things out there. Now, I will say now that I know about those little cooler units, basically, again, it's really simple. It slips over the part of your insulin pen or vial, I guess, is if I were going to be at the beach all day, yes, I would use that device. But for every day, just me out and about having dinner with friends, no, I'm not too worried about it because I don't live in a hot climate.
And I think I should explain to our listeners here is that insulin is supposed to be stored when you're not using it in a cool environment. Okay.
Refrigerator. Yeah.
If insulin gets to a certain level of heat, it will break down and will not function.
Right.
So a lot of people, when I was on MDI, like you, multiple daily injection, I did have I don't know how it looks like almost a glass case.
Yeah.
And it, basically kept my insulin cool.
Right.
Obviously, when I was living in Chicago in the winter, that didn't matter. But in the summer, it did.
Right. Well, I want to go back to just so people understand, because when we're talking about all the gear that you might see. So when we go back to CGMs, there are a number of different types. I currently wear a Dexcom, but I've also worn an Abbott Freestyle Libre. Right. With that being said, with the Dexcom, you have a sensor, which is the part that's inserted into your actual skin. I use skin tack sometimes before that, which means that it helps the adhesive really stick to your skin.
Yes, I use that as well.
Can be bittersweet. And then you insert the sensor, and then your transmitter, which is the device that actually connects with the sensor. And I'm going to say reads your blood sugar and connects with your phone or other parts. Is that all the parts of it, like a Dexcom?
Well, I think we should clarify a little bit on the Freestyle Libre 2, which is a continuous glucose monitor like the Dexcom G6. You'll see people take their cell phone,
right,
wave it over their sensor, and that's how they get their reading. Whereas the G6 from Dexcom sends your readings directly to your cell phone.
Right.
Via an app. So the receivers, in fact, I don't even think they're even giving out receivers anymore.
Right.
If I remember correctly. I mean, there are, obviously, if you don't have a cell phone, it's got to be read somewhere.
Right.
So, and I think one of the things we're saying to these people who don't have diabetes but are touched by it, they could be a big help to us. I remember, the other day when my son was visiting me, he made sure, hey, Dad, you have your PDM with you. We're about to go out for dinner.
Right.
And that is one of the, if you know about them all, and everybody handles it differently.
Yeah.
Like you obviously carry a lot more stuff than I did.
Right.
And plus you're kind of required to in a way.
Yeah.
Because I'm always getting insulin. You only get insulin when you inject it. Now, when do you find anybody gets confused or nervous with your stuff? I mean, do they?
No. I had dinner with one of my dearest girlfriends last night from high school, and I hadn't seen her in a while. And no, I don't. Nobody gets freaked out about anything. They ask questions now because I'm making it more available. I mean, I'm not hiding it anymore, I guess. Lots of questions, but no.
Now, here's another question for you. Do you wear a bracelet?
No, but I have a tattoo on my arm that says type 1 diabetic.
Ah, okay.
So I hated this shitty jewelry, and it was just like horrible. So that's the only tattoo my parents ever approved of was the type 1 diabetes one.
Well, and because it is interesting, there are medical ID bracelets.
Sure.
I mean, for me, hypothetically, I hate to even say this, but this is true. If I was in, let's say, a car accident and I was unconscious, it's pretty obvious I'm a type 1 diabetic because I'm wearing,
gear. Yeah.
I'm wearing gear. But there are a lot of people, and there are apps, by the way, for that as well.
Yeah.
Which is, I consider that part of our gear, actually, because, listen, they're called emergencies for a reason.
Right.
And it is important that you're, like, for example, okay, let's say the difference between you and I, let's say if we were in an accident or unconscious, other than your tattoo, it wouldn't be obvious to, let's say, a paramedic that you had type 1 diabetes.
That's correct. Yeah.
And I'm going to say this, that our listeners should also be aware of this. There are people who wear continuous glucose monitors who are not diabetic. They just use it for a different reason. So the fact that you're wearing a sensor doesn't necessarily, quote unquote, there's a pretty damn good chance you have diabetes. But the other thing they don't know is they don't know what kind of diabetes you have.
Right.
Meaning that there are patients who use a continuous glucose monitor who don't use insulin. So that's why when I look at what I call an emergency kit, all right, we talked about this the other day.
Yeah.
Let's say, you live in Oklahoma. It's known for tornadoes in the summer. I guess there's tornado season.
Sometimes in the winter, right now, with the weather being so good. Yeah. Yeah.
But think about all the things you would have to pack in an emergency kit.
Yeah.
Most people, they're packing an emergency kit. What are they packing? Batteries and flashlights and flares.
Maybe a passport, Yeah.
Yeah. We have to pack, insulin. I have to bring pods,
every single bit of diabetes gear possible.
And and this is the other weird thing, is not only do we have gear, we have a lot of packaging that holds the gear.
Which is bulky.
But,
yeah.
There are companies that are out there. A lot of them are going to be in a marketplace, and they make, basically what I call diabetes friendly carrying pouches, almost like a purse, man purse, woman purse, whatever you want to call it.
Oh yeah. There's all kinds of.
So,
yeah.
God, I don't know if I can't think of any other gear that.
Well, here's the other gear that we're not talking about. Granted, neither one of us are using I'm going to say traditional insulin pump. So there's tubing. There's is it an infusion set, or what is that called?
An infusion set is what attaches to your body, where there is a little piece of tubing that goes in your body. That's what delivers the insulin.
A cannula.
It's called a cannula, right? And then with a conventional insulin pump, there is tubing that attaches to your actual pump.
Which looks like a pager.
Yeah, pager or a small iPhone, I guess is the way I would describe it. And they got even more stuff because they have reservoirs which hold the insulin. So,
and you need syringes, right, to be able to fill the reservoir?
Right. Reservoirs, unfortunately, do not come pre-filled. So and if you talk to somebody who uses because the two things that drive an insulin pump crazy, and I, even though I'm on the Omnipod and I'm not tubed, it still does drive me crazy.
You have to fill it.
You have to fill it. And filling it, and this is, oh my God, you have to make sure you have no insulin bubbles. Right. And that little syringe that you're using to fill either your pod or your reservoir, because insulin bubbles could cause what's called an inclusion, which basically means the insulin is being blocked from getting into your body.
So many things. This is why we're cranky. This is why we are cranky.
And I was thinking the other day during one of our previous podcasts, I think you and I probably take a lot of this just for granted because we do it every day.
Right.
Whereas I think the people around us, whether it's our friends, our family members, our coworkers, they look at us like, oh my God.
Seamless. It's easy. They just got this going on. Or no, it's a lot to deal with.
And the advice I would give everybody who's listening is that if you have a question about like a particular device, hey, we'll be happy to answer it. But, ask your friend, your partner, your coworker, what does that thing do? Because this is, first of all, there's no cure for diabetes. It's never going to go away. We're always going to be using something.
Yeah.
Okay. I mean, I don't know about you, but like I do take other medications.
Yeah.
Because a lot of the patients who are on multiple medications, they'll have pill cases,
Yeah.
that tell them, when and how. There's reminders and all that stuff.
Right.
It really is. I don't know any other disease state. If you have asthma, you're obviously carrying around that inhaler thing.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know any other disease state where a patient, I don't care how you're treating your diabetes, isn't carrying around a lot of stuff.
There's a lot of stuff. And I want to say something too, and you brought this up a little bit, but it just was making me think about how to have a conversation with someone when you want to know about their gear. I went on a mental health retreat. It was a week-long thing and it was awesome. And I talked about diabetes throughout that. And we were sitting at lunch, like day 3 out of the 5. And the people around me just kind of looked over and said, so I'm watching you look at your meal. You're checking your blood sugar. You're pulling out your insulin. They're like, tell me what's going on right now. And it was nice because they knew that this was something that was on my mind. So they just wanted to better understand it. So it was a wonderful conversation. And at the end of it, they said, wow, you really deal with a lot of things. And we would never know because you don't talk about it. And it was great because I think that let me know that they had some compassion for what I was going through. But also, I really appreciated them asking because it gave me an opportunity to educate.
Well, no, but you bring up a great point because I think that far too often there's a lot of misunderstanding about diabetes in every form. And it is very complimentary. And I don't know about you, but it means a ton to me when somebody is empathetic about what I'm doing.
Absolutely.
I mean, I'm not a victim. You're not a victim. We have a chronic disease. Yes, we can manage it.
Yeah.
But it is, especially for us, we are insulin user. We don't get up, we don't take pills like I know patients who take a pill in the morning, pill at lunch, and a pill at night, whatever. That's really, how complicated is that, assuming you remember to take them. But for us, it is a little bit more, we become our own computers in a way.
Some days they work and some days they don't.
Exactly. Well, and, it's funny, the story that you shared, because I had a similar experience. I was at a conference once and I was having dinner and I'm sitting there with my PDM in my hand, and people kept asking me, what is that? And I had to explain what it does. And then the gentleman who was sitting next to me, he goes, you're really looking at your food in a weird way. I said, yeah, I'm mentally calculating what it's going to do to me.
It's like a calculator is going high, 20 miles an hour. And I got to say one thing to that too, me learning about gear from another person living with diabetes. So I was at the Diabetes Mind Innovation Summit and I sat next to a gentleman who was looping and there was a white device sitting on the table. And I was like, what in the hell is that? Like, this is something. And anyway, it was the Riley link. Is that what it's called? Yeah. Or the Riley device. So there's another piece of gear.
Yeah. Without getting overly complicated. Okay. Use the term looping. Okay. And basically what that means is there's a company that developed an app that runs on a phone that will run the Omnipod insulin pump on a continuous basis. But in order for the data, oh my God, here we go. In order for the data to get from the pump and the CGM to the phone, you have to carry what I call an interim device.
A connector.
Yeah, connector, dongle, whatever you want to call it. You won't need that when the newer devices come out. I think we both kind of know with our gear, and we just talked about this earlier today. Our gear sometimes works just fine, but sometimes when it's going to a phone, the phone ain't working.
Yeah, exactly. Everything, it depends on who wants to communicate and connect that day. And I will say too, one of the things when we're talking about our gear on our marketplace, there'll be a number of wonderful companies, people living with diabetes that have come out with, I'm going to say more for the female, but they've come out with some cool stuff for guys, but cool ways to not be hauling a bunch of shit around. And it kind of looks like a fun purse or a backpack and stuff. So,
well, and it's also interesting that you mentioned that, because I think, especially for somebody, a female, and I've never seen this for males, but for females that are on insulin pump therapy, and if they're on a conventional, what I call a conventional tube pump, not which is tubeless, there are companies out there, and I'm sure we'll get them into the marketplace, who actually make.
Oh, yeah. You got pockets and bras and garter belts. That's a part of the gear.
Yeah.
That garter belt may look sexy, but it's holding a pump.
That's for damn sure. Well, it's the things we deal with. And so So I guess the message, my message to everybody is, hey, we carry around a ton of crap. We really do. I mean, even, over my diabetes journey, I'm grateful because I am carrying around less crap right now. When I first started doing this, I was carrying around, like you, I was carrying around my insulin pens, my meter, my strips that go
Lancets. We forgot. We haven't even mentioned lancets. Lancets stick in the pricker to prick your fingers.
Lancets. I mean, I was carrying around a lot of stuff. And it gets, and I think, and again, I don't want to overemphasize this, that contributes what I call to the diabetes, the fatigue of having diabetes.
Absolutely.
They have all your stuff.
Yeah.
And I was very lucky that when my wife was alive, she was very good about reminding me, hey, Dave, do you have this?
And so you didn't feel micromanaged. You appreciated her wanting.
Right. I mean, it was done. Again, this is one of those things where I think, again, you get a little bit further with empathy than you do with guilt.
Sure, absolutely.
So that's my advice, everybody. You got any advice for anybody?
I think the only thing that I would say is if I were let's just say a partner of someone living with diabetes, and let's just say a Thursday night and you're like, hey, let's go to dinner. Let's go. Or you're running late for something. Just remember, the person with diabetes doesn't just get to throw on their shoes and grab their purse. They've got to think about all the things that we've talked about today. So I can understand if you're running late, but have a little patience. And again, like your wife, who's unfortunately no longer with us, I think about if she were to you have a designated area to where when you need to run quickly, grab, because everything's in one spot. So plan ahead a little bit.
That's an interesting point because we have to store all this stuff. I mean,
right.
But it is cool. All right. That's good. That's it for today.
Yay.
See you again.